Thank you very much, Olivier, and good morning, good afternoon, or evening. I'm Robert Pinter, Market Development Manager at International Copper Association Europe. And let me also welcome everyone at the 13th webinar of Zero Emission Buildings Academy. We organize this series of webinars in partnership with Building Performance Institute Europe, or BPIE, and the European Construction Technology Platform, ECTP. The aim of this academy is to share information and knowledge related to decarbonization of buildings and promote the transition to a zero-emission building stock. Each webinar invites experts to deep dive in one specific aspect that is relevant for this transition and offers also enough time for questions. Today, our subject is Green Cities, Integrating Nature for Sustainable Urban Development. We are going to explore innovative approaches to sustainable urban development and biodiversity conservation. We will deep dive into the transformative potential of nature-based solutions and green infrastructure, highlighting how these interdisciplinary strategies can bring greater sustainability to the built environment. I am very pleased to introduce Sarah Bekessy, Professor of Sustainability and Urban Planning at RMIT University in Australia, who will speak today about designing cities for everyday nature. Sarah's presentation will be followed by Arturo Fernandez, Associate Landscape Architect at ARUP, a global collective of designers, engineers, and technical experts dedicated to sustainable development. And today, Arturo will present on designing for a positive impact on nature. That's all from my side, and let's make a deep dive into today's topic. I stop here and give the floor to Sarah for the first presentation.
Thank you very much, Robert, for the lovely introduction. I'm just going to share my screen with my slides. I'm really hoping that everyone can see that okay. Maybe, Robert, could you just quickly tell me that that's okay? That looks okay?
Excellent. Okay,
terrific. Well, thank you so much for the kind invitation to present today. I'm very excited. It's the middle of winter here in Australia, where I'm presenting from. And if you want to do something just for trivia, where I'm presenting from is a tiny little town called Mitta, M-I-T-T-A, M-I-T-T-A, Mitta. You can Google it. It's a town of about 20 people in the Victorian Alpine region. So it's very cold today here in Mitta, but also extremely lovely. In Australia, we always start our presentations by providing an acknowledgement to the people who are the traditional owners and custodians of the land that we currently work, live and play on. And here in Mitta, it's the Yaitmathang people of the Dodoroa language groups. So I'd like to pay my respects to those people and thank them for always caring for country in this part of the world. What I want to talk to you today about is why the construction, planning, design, engineering professions need to worry about nature in cities, and what kind of role you need to play in actually trying to solve the biodiversity extinction crisis. But let me just start by saying that this is enlightened self-interest to be starting to think about nature. We all know this because we know that cities have unprecedented challenges. Some of them are related to climate, some of them heat, some of them to do with extreme weather events, fires in Australia. They really threaten our cities. Pandemics, just exponential population growth, tourism. These all create massive stresses on cities, and how you keep people healthy, happy, connected, and stress-free in a city is a major challenge for every city around the world. And now it almost goes without saying that nature must be part of the solution to many of these challenges. And that is because we know that the benefits nature provide are really, truly extraordinary, whether it's from the health and well-being benefits that I'll talk a little bit more about, enabling our cities to cope under the stresses of climate change, connecting with traditional culture and making a city uniquely of that place. Our vegetation often, if you travel to a city and you walk out of the airport, one of the reasons you often know that you're in a different city is often the vegetation, the bird sounds, the smells, the trees that you see. And you know, I think one of the things that we often talk about is that cities with nature are much healthier environments for us, our children, our elderly people to live in. We know that if you live in a street with more nature, more biodiversity, you will have a longer and happier and healthier life. You'll be less likely to die from heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. Remarkable. You will have better sleep, improved mood, less likely to have mental well-being disorders. Your children will have improved, if they're lucky to play in a school with more biodiversity, they will have improved cognitive development and less behavioural issues. It's an extraordinary thing that these kinds of benefits, and they seem to be emerging almost every day in the literature, are really remarkable. And it's one of the reasons why cities think that investing in nature in cities is very much a worthwhile pursuit. I talked about the sense of place. Now, this isn't a European city, and you know that because it looks so much like an Australian city. It's a place that once was a drain, and so this has been all created in relatively recent time. But you'd walk down this street and you'd feel like you were in Australia. This is a building in Germany that has really distinctive German vegetation, and it feels like Germany because of the vegetation. So I think this sense of place that you can create through biodiversity is a really important benefit that's perhaps overlooked sometimes when we talk about nature-based solutions. In Australia, it's really important because we are kind of waking up to the fact that we have Aboriginal, Indigenous, First Nations history and culture that we want to try and bring back and celebrate and respect. And so the urban greening agenda is one that we're taking very seriously. This is a butterfly we're trying to bring back to Melbourne. And we have 7 seasons in Melbourne, not just the 4 seasons, there's 7 seasons that are Aboriginal seasons. And this butterfly once used to come out in massive numbers in Melbourne at the start of one of the 7 seasons. We want to bring this back to Melbourne to connect people with Indigenous history and culture. And yet we know that the greening agenda is sometimes forgetting about biodiversity. We're planting street trees that are from other countries. This is a street, it could be any street in the world, couldn't it? It could be a European street, it could be a Chinese street, it could be anywhere in the world. It's actually an Australian street, it's in Adelaide. It's a beautiful street, it's nice and cool in the summer. And it's, you know, but unfortunately it has very little biodiversity. It's actually like a biodiversity desert. Why? Because the trees we've planted here do not belong to Australia. They're not native species to Australia. 2, because there's no diversity of vegetation. So if you look at this, normally what you'd expect in a forest is to have an overstory, canopy trees like this, a mid-story to have shrubs, and then an understory to have the herb sort of layer. So that's all the wildflowers and those kinds of, you'd see them in Europe. And so that is where you provide, how you provide biodiversity in a street. This street is a biological desert. And it's a very unfortunate thing that a lot of nature-based solutions are not embracing biodiversity. Now, that's a problem because I told you all of those benefits that I mentioned previously are often linked to not just green, but to biodiversity. So we're missing out on many benefits to people. But it's also a problem because cities play a very important role in terms of preserving and protecting threatened species and species that can go extinct. In fact, it's a strange thing, but many cities around the world harbour many threatened species. And Australia is one example of a country. There are 39 endangered species that only occur in cities. We must protect them or they will disappear. And Europe would have many species that only occur in cities as well. And cities can be very important places to preserve and protect biodiversity. We know that nature underpins all aspects of our lives, our prosperity, our well-being. Most of our gross domestic product, most of our medicines, so much of our pollination, and so many other kind of benefits are provided by nature. It is the only viable way that we currently have to reverse climate change is through carbon sinks provided by nature. It's a really valuable asset, and yet its capacity to deliver these services is declining everywhere. From our ability to pollinate crops to our ability to sequester carbon and help with mitigate climate change, nature's capacity to deliver to us, this is according to the International Panel for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, their global assessment, it found that nature's ability to provide these services is declining, and it's declining everywhere. And we know that we're continuing to lose species at a really rapid rate. This is a graph that shows on the grey bar on the bottom what we'd expect to see in terms of species loss, and the coloured bars are what we're actually seeing. In Australia, we have 19 ecosystems showing clear signs of collapse. Ecosystems like the Great Barrier Reef are disappearing. A lot of really common species like the koala are now threatened with extinction. And so what I'm trying to say is cities have got a really critical role to play when it comes to thinking about the biodiversity extinction crisis. And we can be part of the solution if we do things carefully. This is not doing things carefully. This is a terrible sign for a housing estate in Australia. And it's definitely a terrible approach to housing that, is probably quite American in a way. That we have embraced. And a lot of our housing estates are going into places with very threatened and endangered species and ecosystems. And it's not the right approach. This is not the right approach, where we're denying people the access to nature that is going to give them all of those benefits. We need to move away from those kinds of approaches. And we also need to think about not just the footprint of our urban developments, but also the construction materials. Our supply chains are very critical contributors to the extinction crisis. This is an analysis that showed that about a quarter of the extinction risk from materials in Australia were linked to industrial and residential construction. So it's a very big contributor. The supply chains are really important when it comes to biodiversity extinction. So there are really important and impressive, I think, alternatives where we start really thinking about how we can be nature positive with our development industry. We developed this idea called biodiversity sensitive urban design to try as a process for building nature positive cities, how we bring back and care for nature within the urban fabric so that we leave things in a better state than when we began. And there are a few steps that I'm going to quickly talk you through. The first one is identifying values. So it's not just about what we have left on a site, because often that's a bit depressing. So this is an example in Adelaide in Australia, where we had to look to the past because a lot of the ecosystems of Adelaide have disappeared. But this is what it used to look like. Beautiful birds, billabongs, wetlands and calatrus trees. And could we try and reflect those ecosystems in our design? Or maybe it's looking to activities like swimming in the river, like we're doing in Paris, for example. These can be really motivating values that you'd really like to enhance. So what we like to think about is the past, the present, and the potential of a site. Not just what's there currently, but the past, the present, and the potential. Then you set objectives. So the objectives might be, we'd like to bring back some of those species from the past in our development. Or we'd like to protect some things that are really special for conservation value. We'd love to bring back some species that are culturally significant or might even have economic utility. We did this for a place called Fisherman's Bend in Melbourne. It's a very big urban renewal project where we brought all of the stakeholders together, the developers, the water authorities, the traditional owners, everyone who had a stake in this site. And we said, what would it look like if we'd been successful to deliver biodiversity? And we had these very lovely objectives: place known for its diverse ecosystems, a place for the senses, a place of shifting waters, some really desirable features. And we designed some ways of actually producing habitat or designing habitat for certain species that if we did this, we'd really develop a really enchanting and beautiful place for people to live. After you've got your objectives, so just like you would have with a zero emissions building, you'd have really clear biodiversity objectives. These are the species we want to protect. These are the ecosystems we want to have resilient and thriving. Then you can easily identify what actions you need to undertake. So what kind of resources do you need to provide? It might be that rather than just having a canopy tree in a street, you need to have some mid-story and understory, as I said before. Maybe some rocks and logs or water sources. Or maybe we call them habitat analogues, places for animals to live that are artificial but can still support nesting or feeding points or roosting points for birds or other wildlife. We've produced this habitat pole. So these are little modular items that you can attach to any pole in the city. There are lots of poles in cities. So it can be a water point for birds. It can be a nesting box for birds, or it can be plants for insects, for example, on a pole. Threats. There are so many threats to wildlife in cities, from lighting to glass to having cats and foxes we have in Australia. I know foxes are often natural in European cities, but there are so many ways to avoid those threats. If you tilt glass in a window a little bit downwards, birds see the ground, they don't see the sky, and they do not fly into it. Wildlife sensitive lighting is the same. We know how to design it. We need to just implement it. Connectivity, so how you build bridges for wildlife, underpasses and overpasses for wildlife in roads, for example. Thinking about how animals use a city and create stepping stones and bridges and pathways for them to move through a city. And then really importantly, how you design places so that people want to engage with wildlife and they want to be stewards. They want to look after wildlife. And that is a design problem, and there are design solutions to make people want to be part. Everyone wants to be part of the solution. They don't want to be part of the problem. So how do you design to encourage that kind of behavior? We also have many ways of assessing different actions so that we can really understand whether we're likely to achieve our goals. But I don't have time to talk about that today, unfortunately. We have done this biodiversity sensitive urban design for single buildings like this, through to whole streetscapes where we have connectivity for species and all the different provision of resources and mitigation of threats, to whole precincts whole suburbs where we're really designed to enchant people with everyday nature and provide the benefits that it delivers. So let me just conclude by saying, I think we've all got a role to play in cities. It's not good enough for us to just minimize our impact on biodiversity. We all need to really be active in the nature positive sphere and thinking about how we embrace nature as a really important asset in our cities and design to maximize it at every step of the process. A lot of these ideas are highlighted in the course that RMIT is providing called Urban Sustainability Strategies, if you're interested in following up with any more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'm going to present now. Let me share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can see it now. I would like to speak about why a positive impact on nature, and sorry. Okay, designing for a positive impact on nature, and starting with this question: why a positive impact on nature? And it comes with this question: is it in order to obtain accreditation? That should be encouraged and as a best practice, but definitely is not the main goal. The main goal is like having this mindset of incorporating nature while we design as part of the design process. And in ARUP we have a quote where we say that we shape a better world, and that will be through brilliant design, technical innovation. Also is important and really important social contribution. And lastly, it's even more important, like environmental improvements and having a positive contribution to nature. I think it's important that we change our mind and we see it as a way of designing. It's not an addition, it's embedded within our mindset. And to illustrate that, I have a few projects, or I would like to start speaking about some initial experiences, and I will end also with what is our current approach in some of the projects we are developing right now. And I would like to expand two projects, one and really different projects. One is a very small scale and within an urban environment in London, which with very small fees, and the other is a massive project, a large scale, peri-urban in the Middle East. Starting with my initial career, I started my professional career in France more than 15 years ago. And I have been really lucky because since the beginning, I have been participating in projects that incorporated net gains of in biodiversity, habitat creations, nature-based solutions, or SATs, even when those terms were not in use or very rarely used. We were already implementing them within real projects. And I can quickly speak to you about one, which was it is the headquarters of Rossignol near the Alps in France. And it is an impressive landscape where you can see the mountains and surrounded by lakes. The project is a headquarters that has associated a very large car park as well. And what we did is integrating the car park within the landscape by implementing shoots and a forest to shade the cars, and then bring through phytoremediation, cleaning this water and bringing it to a central pond that was playing also ornamental role, by reflecting the building, but also by decantation. It was finalizing the cleaning process of the water, and then the water was brought into wetlands and to the lake system. For the two case studies, I will start with the small one, as I was mentioned, and this one is a project that is part of what we call Invest in ARUP. Invest in ARUP, they are like projects that are funded by us, and normally they have a goal of research, or also like supporting local communities, or yes. This project is called Chiswick Oasis, and it's a project that is really linked with the Sustainable Cities online course provided by RMIT, and it targets green infrastructure and green cities. It targets as well sustainable transport and urban mobility, and finally it targets air quality, and that was the main issue. This school, it was published through Facebook, actually, that some parents, there is a parents association for a school in London that was called as the most polluted school in London. Kids were not able to use the open spaces, the courtyard, and they posted, they created an association called Chiswick Oasis. That was in order to create a green wall aiming to reduce pollution at the courtyard. We contacted the parents association, and we created this Invest in ARUP to support them with their strategy. It is a really small scale project. It is a 250 meters wall, and what we did is facilitating the process and looking for different stakeholders. For example, for the green wall, we put them in collaboration with the ANS Global, who contributed economically, and also with the maintenance of this green wall that was implemented. And the green wall was divided in 3 pieces. One central piece of 150 meters, which was mainly with the EV. Not great in terms of biodiversity, but it was the plant with the better effects in terms of pollution reduction. Then we have another one that was more focused on biodiversity and ornamental aspects, which are the one that we are showing in the screen. And finally, we have a third one that was 50 meters about growing food, and it was more interactive. Every kid in the school will have their own small plant, edible plants, normally like strawberries or rosmarinus. So it was a way of them being part of this process, getting engaged. The benefits from this installation are various, like biodiversity, obviously, and increasing the number of plants, increasing the number of plants as well, the species and number of plants. And also we noticed with the site surveys, working with the ecologists, that there was an increase in the number of species of fauna species that were using this wall. It is true that the effects of a green wall in terms of reducing pollutants for the air quality is they are not massive, and they are mainly blocking pollutants within the foliage of the EV in this case. But we didn't stop there. We were like engaging with the different stakeholders, with different companies, with different initiatives. And one of them, for example, it was the first one, which is the No Cars Friday, which is like an initiative from the school where all of the kids come one day, normally Friday, to the school without making use of cars. So they come by walking or by cycling, and that is a way of also like having an influence in the community. The second one, it was like painting the internal doors of the school with the air light in this case, which is a substance that helps like filtering pollutants, especially nitrogen dioxide, with air purifiers implemented by the third stakeholder. Edible gardens, we created a series of edible gardens, and we opened them to the local communities. during some of the weekends. This is a part of it's both ways. The school was opening their doors to the community, and the community was contributing to reduce pollution as well, like trying to use less the cars for commuting, and finally with some indoor plants as well. It was a really participative process with the kids, with the teachers. We created formulas and we showcase the benefits with the records of that were like collected on these questionnaires. We were comparing the well-being effects of those interventions and the massive impact it has on the kids, especially. The children play more at the playgrounds. They use them again. Air quality inside of the school grounds and buildings has improved up to 37%. There is also a positive well-being impact, and that's reflected through 47% playground users spending more time outside than before. The green wall provides also like valuable resources for children to learn, as we were mentioning, with those pockets where they were like taking care of their own plants. Air quality has risen up the agenda in all London boroughs, and I must say that even the mayor of London came for the opening of this green wall. And finally, other schools are implementing similar strategies, and we have been part of some of them. Now I would like to speak about another project. This one is at a larger scale, and it is very urban. It is in Oman, which is in the Arabic Peninsula, south of the Arabic Peninsula. And this is a project that extends over more than 400 hectares. You can see, well, it is not far from Muscat, which is the capital, so it is still under the influence of an urban area, but it is more like a space to spend weekends, etc. The city will be at the other side of this range of mountains that you see in the image. And this project is all about biodiversity and conservation of nature. Oman is really rich in endemic species, and in this case, what we are doing is like an open air germoplasm bank, which consists on a place where you not only preserve the species, but propagate them, counting not only with the clones of the same species, but promoting as well like biodiversity and genetical richness. In this case, we were like recreating this is important. We were not creating a standard botanical garden, but we were recreating habitats. So what we are representing are real habitats. It's not creating just a display of plants, it's a display of habitats where we have 3 different kind of deserts: the gravel desert, the sand desert, and the gravel desert. We have the wadis, which are normally the dry rivers that crosses those arid landscapes. And we have 2 protected habitats because they are from areas up in the mountains with that will have more precipitations and that needs special conditions. For that, with Greenshow, we developed those greenhouses, which are the opposite of traditional greenhouses. Those greenhouses will be to cool the space inside, with providing with shade and keeping the humidity. The buildings are raised, so we also like studied water and runoff, so they will not obstruct the runoff. Runoff is considered by implementing gravel chutes that are at the lowest part of the project. And then in terms of playing with the local materials and circularity, we are using traditional materials and traditional way of building, like for example the walls, the terraces that recreates agricultural terraces of the northern mountains in Oman, but also those shading structures that are using traditional methods. All of the materials are local for this botanic garden, so everything was from Oman or the surrounding countries. And then finally, planting. Planting is the key aspect of this botanic garden. And as I was mentioning, it plays with the only endemic vegetation. All of the plants that we are using are from Oman, and it's also a way to display how people could use native planting for their gardens. In Oman, the tradition is to go for ornamental species normally that they are not from Oman. So we have also a demonstration garden where we are going to be displaying how can they use those plants that are endemic and native into their gardens or into their own spaces. And the water used for irrigation is all coming from recycled water. And finally, where we are now, currently we are developing some of the projects that could be urban or within a metropolitan context or rural. And the most important thing is that we try to collaborate with other disciplines. So we are not designing from scratch. So the first thing we do is bring into the table water specialists and ecologists, and they help us defining what is the design strategy. Key vectors that we are exploring are water with climate mitigation and adaptation, environmental and biodiversity, social well-being, and finally social infrastructure. And with social infrastructure, we mean a soft mobility or sustainable drainage. Thank you.